Today, the PFL has purchased Bellator MMA, and I pose the question, if a MMA company that is failing is purchased in the woods and no one is around to really witness it, or maybe some people don't really care about it, did it really happen? Also, is the new match to make Don Davis versus Dana White in the middle of the octagon at UFC 300 in a PFL versus UFC crossover? And what about Patchy Mix? What about him? Where's he going to go? What's he going to do? He's in high demand. What's going to happen? All of this and more on today's episode of Matter of Fact MMA. What's up? What's happening? Let's go. So, what's up, guys? We are here. Thanksgiving week. Thanksgiving is going down tomorrow. So, happy Thanksgiving to you and yours if you celebrate the holiday. And so, we're going to try to get into a little bit of news that might have, recently dropped. A couple things that's going on. Primarily starting off with the PFL has now purchased Bellator MMA. Here's the thing. So this happens. This is a twofold type of conversation. Okay, so let's get the positive side of the conversation out of the way. The positive side of it is now that Bellator is going to stay alive. According to Don Davis and the PFL, they are going to be underneath of the PFL umbrella, but ran separately. So, there's that. That's one thing I think a lot of people have been wondering what's going to happen. And here's the positive side of this. It is going to keep essentially one organization, but you could kind of say two organizations. If you're ever going to look at the Bellator organization as separate, it allows for fighters to have another place to go. So if fighters don't make it to the UFC, they can go over to PFL Bellator. If fighters are in some sort of a contract dispute with the UFC, they can go over to PFL Bellator. It basically gives another option. So shout out to this merging of the companies, really PFL buying the other, and it allowing fighters to still have another place to go. But not so fast. Here's the thing about this. Now that we got the positive out of the way, let's go ahead and we're going to S all over this whole deal. All right, so here's the deal, bro. Okay, so all right, so now Bellator is going to be a part of PFL. PFL has got like an international league. They've got a league in Europe. They're going to have something going on in Africa, which at the top of the bill of that, or running that portion of the organization, is going to be Francis Ngannou. I'm not sure when he's going to do that or how he's going to do that, because I know that he's definitely shopping his next boxing bout, right? And when it comes to the PFL, to me, the PFL is an organization that, in my opinion, is in the business of selling a lot of wolf tickets. You know what I'm saying? So when you look at it, I mean, if I had a werewolf howl noise, I would press that button right now, because that's what they're in the business of. Since I already brought him up, let's start with Francis Ngannou. I don't know when Francis is going to run or head an organization in Africa on behalf of the PFL. I'm not sure when that's going to happen. I'm not sure the logistics of that. Shout out to Francis Ngannou. He's getting that bag, so I'm happy for him. But I don't really know what's going to happen as far as that goes. As well as they've got kind of like this European league that, for what I understand, he might not be the head of it, but the figurehead of this is Dan Hardy. Shout out to Dan Hardy. I love his channel. I love his content. He's also helping his wife train for fights in the UFC. She still has an active career there. He's got a lot of obligations. I'm not sure what's going to really happen on that front as far as the PFL. Let's also talk about the regular PFL. So constantly throughout the year, they keep getting their top fighters popped for, PEDs, performance-enhancing drugs, juicing, roids, whatever you want to call it, special sauce, Mexican supplements, as Joe Rogan would say. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, bro, every time you really start to maybe follow one of their top fighters, if they, if that is such a thing, they're always getting in some sort of trouble. So then they're kind of out of it. Also, let's move back to Francis Ngannou. When is Francis Ngannou actually going to fight for the PFL? When you almost went out there and you almost beat Tyson Fury, when is you going to come back and fight for the PFL? And who would you even fight? You know what I'm saying? You can offer that $2 million to whoever. But, I mean, who's really getting ready to come in there and fight? And now that they've got Bellator, is anyone really clamoring to see Francis Ngannou step into the cage and literally end the life of Ryan Bader? I mean, is anybody really trying to see Ryan Bader, who hasn't looked good in like his last 2 to 3 fights? Is anybody, I mean, this guy, this man was out here fighting Czech Congo, you know what I'm saying? And he was having a tough time. So it's like, bruh, I don't know. I mean, him versus Francis, I mean, okay, yeah, you could do that. And if you still want to keep, Bellator's heavyweight title around, yeah, okay, Francis will swoop in and take that belt too. And maybe that's the move. But then they've got this pay-per-view model. And it's like, they've got a pay-per-view going down like this Friday, or I don't think it's tomorrow night, but it might actually be tomorrow night. It might be on Thanksgiving night. They've got a pay-per-view going down, and it's like, bro, stop. And they want $50 for it. And it's like, stop, bro. Like, you can't keep propping up like Kayla Harrison against these randos, and I know her original opponent pulled out, but you can't keep putting her up against these randos and, thinking people are going to pay $50 for this. You know what I'm saying? What are we doing? Nobody's going to pay $50 to watch Francis Ngannou go out there and beat the brains out of Ryan Bader. You know what I'm saying? Like, Bellator. I'm sorry, PFL. Like, what is going on? So since I just said it, what about Bellator? Okay, so when I look at Bellator, and, I don't talk a lot about Bellator on my channel, but here's the thing. I've watched Bellator for like a long time. I really actually liked them more when they had their tournament format, right? When they did away with the tournament format, they've had cards where you really wanted to see certain fights, certain matchups, but most of the time, Bellator, their primary issue is they suck at matchmaking. They've always sucked at matchmaking. And PFL, from what I see, sucks at matchmaking as well. And here's what I'm saying. Both companies, every time that they have an outstanding striker that everyone wants to see, this person can strike, whether it's via their power and knocking people out, or it's their technique. Or maybe they have an exotic technique like Michael Venom Page. Something along those lines. Bellator and PFL continue to say, oh, we've got this outstanding striker, this outstanding power puncher, this person that makes waves people want to see. Let's put him in there with the best wrestler we can find, the best grappler we can find. What could go wrong? You know what I'm saying? It's like, why would you do that? If anything, put them in there with a can that's going to stand up with them, and they can lay them out in spectacular fashion, and we're all happy to watch it. We were all happy to watch Michael Venom Page dent the cranium, dent the skull of the male cyborg who used to be married to the female cyborg. You know what I'm talking about? This is where she got the name from. It's like, bro, but they continue to sign, PFL continues to sign ex-UFC fighters. Then put them in there with outstanding grapplers if the fighter is primarily a stand-up fighter. Put them in there with outstanding wrestlers and grapplers, and they don't see the issue with that. It's the same way with how they were trying to matchmake, Clarissa Shields. If one lady they put her in there with was primarily stand-up, but they're putting her in there, they're putting her in the cage, the smart cage. It's smart. Too bad your matchmakers ain't smart. They're putting her in there with another female fighter that can grapple and wrestle really well. And maybe that's not that fighter's primary style. But if you've been watching tape and you see that this lady can wrestle at all or grapple at all, you don't want to put her in there with Clarissa Shields. You know what I'm talking about? This is a viable fighter for you. This is the GOAT of boxing. You know what I'm talking about? Greatest woman of all time. She's trademarked that. And she's never lost. And she talks a good game. She's good on the mic. You know what I'm saying? She makes waves in generally whatever she does. And you put her in there with another female that could actually grapple or wrestle. I would have put her in there with someone that was not familiar with grappling or wrestling at all. Who cares that we don't know their name? Who cares we don't know who she is? You put her in there with Clarissa Shields. Clarissa Shields lights her on fire and moves on. And the next thing you know, you look up, Clarissa Shields is like 3 or 4 fight win streak, and then you could kind of throw her in there with somebody else for the $1 million, championship. Whatever, it's matchmaking. And I seen this time and time again in Bellator. Bellator wants to put Yoel Romero, an extremely exciting fighter, even this late in his career, and a physical specimen. You want to put this dude in there with guys that are going to try to take him down or kind of point fight him or move around him, Phil Davis style fighters. And it's like, bro, get that out of here. Like, get that out of here. Throw Yoel Romero in there with fresh meat and let him feast. You know what I'm talking about? That's how you guys could make money. You know what I'm saying? I just don't get either one of these companies. You know, like I said, I watched Bellator for years. I don't talk about Bellator on my channel because, frankly, what is there to talk about? You know what I'm saying? Other than to make fun of their matchmaking. And generally, like, when they do finally make a good matchup, the fight doesn't end up delivering. Or, let's talk about AJ McKee. When AJ McKee had his entire feud with Pitbull, with basically with the Pitbull brothers, you could say. And it's like, at the height of his fame, when he had no losses on his record, Bellator wasn't trotting him out in front of anybody. They were linked with Paramount. Like, you can't get him on Yellowstone with Kevin Costner or something. You know what I'm talking about? Like, you can't trot him out on the Today Show or something. Put him somewhere, because this guy was a star. And he still could be if he goes to the UFC. They kept wasting him against these Pitbull brothers, and eventually he took an L. And you're like, dude, what are y'all doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, they continue to bring in these good fighters. Okay, let's say it's an outstanding wrestler. It's a, they get really good wrestlers, like from Penn State. And it's like, then they want to put that guy in there with a next world level striker with grappling and wrestling. The wrestling and grappling might not be as good as this guy, but they put him in there. But this guy is unknown. They put him in there with a top level wrestler from Penn State, and the wrestler from Penn State loses. Bellator wasted Roy McDonald time and time again. He gets wasted time and time again in the PFL, and you're like, what is going on here? Both companies wasted this man, PFL and Bellator. And now it's just like, now he's all into Jesus, he's married, and, who really even wants to see Rory fight now? You know what I'm talking about? He ain't even got that killer instinct he used to have. That's what I'm saying. And Don Davis is out here talking about that they're not the number 2 company or number 3 company, they're 1B. They're the number 1B company in the world. Who are you kidding, bro? You're charging $50 for your pay-per-views, and nobody wants to see them. And granted, I would go ahead and give you the benefit of the doubt, because everybody's got to start somewhere. My channel's starting somewhere. I don't do big numbers. Everybody's got to start somewhere. So I get it. You're on the hustle. You're on the grind. You're on the come up. But buy a real matchmaker. Hire a real matchmaker. Dig Joe Silva out. You know what I'm saying? Get a real matchmaker. Quit putting your top level star striker power punching fighters in there with world class grapplers or wrestlers. that are boring, that have no personality, that when they win the fight, they're like, yeah, I knew if I stuck to the game plan, I'd, I'd win this fight. Thank you. All glory to God. Like you're what are you doing, bro? Quit doing those type of fights. Like stop doing that type of matchmaking. But if you have a world class wrestler, a world class grappler, that actually is a mouthpiece, that can talk, that can sell some shows for you, or sell some pay-per-views, don't put him in there with a virtually unknown striker that can't speak, who just goes out there and lays him out, and then you're just left with that horrible post-fight interview. Don Davis, stop. Stop taking shots at Dana White. You're lucky Dana White is letting you breathe. And I'm not a huge Dana White fan or anything like that, but at the end of the day, game respect game. I respect Dana White for his business acumen. Yeah, maybe his business practices don't work the best for all the fighters. Don't work best in this lane of fight promotion or in this lane of fight promotion. But dude, Don Davis, stop popping off at Dana White before Dana White really decides to pop off back. I know he says a couple of things in different little interviews and stuff, but if he really wanted to shine a light on why his organization is the premier organization in the world, he could definitely do that. It ain't really no big deal. The last thing I'll say about this is the actual CEO of the TKO company, the TKO brand, which now has WWE and the UFC under it. When he was asked about the PFL Bellator merger, I'm not quoting him exactly, but to paraphrase what he was saying, look, both of those organizations are like feeder leagues for the UFC. They're like the minor leagues. They're like feeder leagues for the UFC. Meaning they're going to have fighters that are going to come in. Maybe they'll cultivate them there. Maybe they won't. Maybe the fighter will make a name for him or herself over social media, whatever the case. But that fighter's goal is to go from PFL or Bellator to the UFC. That's all you guys are. And I'm not saying that in a true disrespectful manner, but understand where you sit in the pecking order. Don't worry about trying to topple the giant or trying to be on the same level of the giant. Just make good fights. Hire a good matchmaker. Make good fights. And over time, you're going to be able to create your own lane. Because if we want to see UFC fighters, we're going to go to the UFC. But there's a whole world of other fighters that are also talented outside the UFC that we would like to see, but you don't match them up well. You don't put them in good fights. You know what I'm saying? And then you're left looking silly. He also said, the CEO of TKO, he also compared this to, you have the XFL and you have the NFL. You know what I'm saying? Everybody that plays in the XFL, their goal is to get to the NFL. And that's just what it is. The XFL is never going to reach the height of the NFL. I don't even know if the XFL is even still going at this exact moment. I know it was like around last year, but I don't even know if it's still around this year. Who knows? Who cares? Nobody's checking for it. That's my point. You wouldn't mind seeing a Patchy Mix fight. You wouldn't mind seeing Yaroslav Amosov fighting. I'm sorry if I mispronounced his name. I guess they can finally do Kayla Harrison versus Cyborg. The bloom might be a little bit off the rose on Kayla Harrison now that she's lost. So we'll see if she wins this fight. I think she's got coming up tomorrow, whenever their pay-per-view is, which I won't be ordering, but I'll find out the results. You know what I'm saying? I mean, no one wants to see Ryan Bader fight. Nemkov, is definitely someone to look out for, but I don't know who the PFL would even match him up with. I don't know who the PFL could match Patchy Mix up with. Jason Jackson, I don't know who he could be matched up with. I don't know, but that's kind of what's going on with that. There's not a ton of new news going on in the UFC. There's going to be a fight between King Bobby Green stepping in there with your boy from City Kickboxing, Dan the Hangman Hooker. Almost forgot his name. they were going to be fighting, but Hangman has said that his arm is broke or injured, something like that. So he's not fighting. So currently the UFC is looking for a short notice replacement fighter to go in and step in there with King Bobby Green next week. So we'll see how they figure all of that out. Outside of that, Justin Gaethje's manager has been, tweeting a little bit about that there might be a BMF title fight against Justin Gaethje and Max Bless Holloway. I'd be here for that fight. I'm not sure if that's really going to happen because Ali says a lot of things, but we'll see what ends up going on. Outside of that, there's not really a ton of news at this time. Tom Aspinall said John Jones should just give up the belt or should be stripped and he should be the actual world champion. Not sure if I agree with that, but I'm not here to S all over that take because, where's John at? So, I don't really know what's going on there, but nevertheless, that's just kind of bring you a little bit up to date on some of the news. Just kind of wanted to drop in, let you guys know about that, kind of vamp on that for a little bit. But nevertheless, I appreciate you guys for joining me for another episode of Matter of Fact MMA. And happy Thanksgiving, and I'll check you next time. Peace.